Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus. It is that time of the year, the time of joy, the time of generosity, the time of laughter, and the time where our next guest finally rejoins us for his annual visit. Just in time for the holidays, for his third inaugural visit to independent Americans, the great and powerful Jason Alexander returns. Welcome back, sir.
Nowhere else am I referred to as the great and powerful. I have to say, I think that's the secret of why I keep coming back to you, Paul.
Well, once a year, I will do it, and I even, for folks watching on video, I put on reindeer antlers for you, and I'll take them off now. I have my holiday shirt on that has hanging with the nomies instead of the homies. I got the whole Christmas thing going on, but happy holidays to you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. Right back to you. I see you've got your tree up and your elves are on the wall and your guitar is back there ready for the carols, no doubt. And
you're an observant man, and you look like you are secretly in Santa's workshop or somewhere.
I work at a Vaseline factory, and it's just a mess over here. But
I love having you here. I love talking to you. It just makes me happy. I know it makes everyone else happy. So let me kick it off with the question I ask of everyone. Jason, where are you and how are you?
Oh, what a lovely thing. Well, I'm home. I'm happy to be home. I'm in LA in my lovely little abode that most of this year, I will tell you, we have worked on totally redoing what is now called the primary bathroom off of the primary bedroom. A job that I thought would take, I'll go crazy, 10 weeks. 10 months later, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. My marriage survived, my home survived, my mental health survived. So I'm here at home, and I am, like you, my friend, we always talk about how blessed we are. And especially at this time of the year, I get it. It's hard not to reflect and just see the blessings. I say to my wife every night, we get into bed and I go, we have a bed. We have a bed. This is really a great thing. It's just those little things that you go, we're not roughing it. We are safe. We are warm. We are together. We are healthy. And tonight we go to bed. Our family is fine. We're good. This was a good day. So that's kind of how I check in.
We all need that. I think it's been a really hard year. I mean, It's kind of like the election. Like every year is the most important election, and every year is like the hardest year, right? Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of exhaustion and a lot of uncertainty, and there's war and there's conflict, and getting that perspective from you, especially, I think, is really important. And your life's work has been about entertaining people and inspiring people, and you continue to give back. But you also mentioned to me you've got a new baby grandchild, which probably brings it all back home in another way. What's that been like?
It's a relatively new thing. He is. We celebrated his 2-month birthday this week. Paul, it's an amazing thing, and everybody, kind of knows that. That being a grandparent is going to be a change for you, a very hard thing to anticipate, and. All through the pregnancy, people would say, how do you feel? How do you feel? And I go, well, I don't really know how. I mean, I'm thrilled. I'm delighted, but it's very abstract. And then you meet this little person, and he just happens to be a particularly sweet looking baby. And my wife always talks about what she misses most about having her babies was that feeling that you could literally just pick a person up and hold them, and their whole world was better. And having that ability to do that for somebody, and you miss it, and you don't realize how much you miss it. And then there's another baby, And in this case, it is my child's child, you know. So seeing him look at his son in the way that I know I looked at him, it's very emotional. It's very hard to really put a finger on to describe, but it is a delicious, delightful blessing. And every time I hold this little guy, I am reminded of there's, as you know so well, there's work to do. We can't just settle back and say, okay, I'm fine, I'm good, my family's okay, and the world is right. The world is struggling, and there are certainly huge groups of people struggling. And what we have learned, or I hope we've learned, is that we're kind of in this together. There is no community that you can go, well, they're, if they make it or don't make it, it's not going to affect me. We are inextricably tied to each other, for better or worse. And it reminds me I gotta keep doing my part. And I really think I don't want to overstate that. I think what I do is fine, and it helps contribute. But everybody, to the extent that they can, has to take care of their own, and then they have to take care of the people that are not their own as best we can, because my grandchild is going to need all those people. He's going to need the world that they build, or the world that they, don't build. So it's like that's a long-winded answer for, is it nice to be a grandpa? Yeah, it's really sweet.
That's a beautiful, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really, it's so candid and so real. And, I think especially around this time of year, energy can be contagious, and it's something that you have shared with so many people around the world. And around this time, it is a joyous time, but it's also a hard time for a lot of folks. And giving that perspective of babies being born and the next generation coming is I think really important. And you're like the best grandpa ever. I can already tell that. I mean, I feel like this is like, now you've gone into this new evolution where you're one of America's elders, and I really view you that way. Like, I think you've become, the Festivus thing is a great component, because you're kind of the spiritual leader that's bigger than religion, and the way you weave together culture and family and politics. I'm gassing you up, but it's deserved. And everyone who's heard you on this show in the past and heard you in more informal settings understands it. And I think that I can't wait to see what that little guy is going to do. I had my little guys are 7 and 3. And last night I was going to a meeting, and they asked me what I was doing. And I told them I was, working on some stuff having to do with Ukraine and politics. And they said, my little guy said, like, is Putin gone yet? And
wow.
And then my other kid said, is Donald Trump coming back? And like, they're engaged and they're aware, and they're also functioning in this world where the pandemic is still impacting their lives. We just got a note they have to mask back up at times, and there's RSV, and my preschool kid, there's pink eye, and there's strep throat. I mean, it's like a giant petri dish, right? Of
the old world,
de Blasio's 3K public petri dish. But I want to ask you to talk about kind of the macro political landscape too, because your insights there are always important. It's independent Americans. I think you have a really unique and independent perspective. When we look at the midterms, right? We've covered it here on this show, and I've talked about the independent wave. I want to what are your takeaways from the midterms and from where we are at this moment, where it's also maybe kind of a temporary lull before Congress comes back in session and beats the heck out of each other from partisan sides? But how do you shape up and think about where we are right now in the political world?
Well, like most Democrats or progressives or whatever you want to call us, the midterms were a shocking and very pleasant surprise. I had sort of girded for a much more disastrous result. And I was almost giddy not because of the sense of, oh, we won. It wasn't the team thing. But I was really afraid that America had gotten to the point where things were so divided and we had become so tribal that there were not enough of us left that cared about, well, let's just preserve our democracy. Let's preserve our traditions. Let's preserve our systems and our institutions. I really thought anarchy was going to rule. And what we found was, no matter where people sat on the political divide, there were enough of us that went, no, I value America as I understood it to be. I value our democracy as we define it. And it is worth saving. And in many cases, for many people, it was worth leaving the party that they think best represents them for one vote at least, as typified by, you know, Texas and Florida, where the governor stood, the Republican governor stood, but the Secretary of States were not the radicals, or their state congressional parties were not the radicals, or their you know, Senate candidates were not the radicals. That was extraordinary and unexpected, and filled me with hope, and reinforced this thing that I do believe, which makes our political situation so tragic. Every time, and Paul, you and I have talked about this, every time I have engaged one-on-one with someone who is on paper the opposite, diametrically opposed to my beliefs, it has never been true. We almost always have so much in common as to the result we would like to see. Where we differ is in what would get us there. We don't differ that much in what we'd like to have as a result, because at the end of the day, I think most people really just want to feel safe and secure and happy, that there is a possibility that tomorrow might be even better than today, and they are perfectly fine with everyone else prospering in the same way, as long as it doesn't diminish the possibility for them. That's where everybody is. And there is a kindness and there is a community to that. And so the midterm for me spoke to that to some small degree. I mean, we're not past the worst of it by a long shot, but it gave me a hope that I was having trouble clinging to. And I also believe that some good people are being sent into leadership positions, and that hopefully they will find a way to navigate us out of this mess. And I'd be more concerned if it was just us, but this is a global phenomenon right now. This move towards a sort of a new far right, a new sort of anarchistic or fascistic or autocratic thinking has having a sort of global moment in the sun that I don't quite understand. Other than here's the sort of lens I look at it through. I really do believe that our 21st century is vastly different from our 20th century. And I always remind people of the Y2K thing, where everybody thought, on New Year's Eve to the year 2000, that there was going to be Armageddon, that the technological systems we built were going to crash, and society as we knew it was going to fall, and there was going to be, just mayhem everywhere. And it didn't happen. So everybody went, oh, 21st century, just like the 20th century, no big deal. And it is so not. The amount of change that has happened in the last 22 years is probably greater than the last 150 years combined. And for people who are conservative in every definition of it, change, especially rapid change, is a frightening thing. Because they can't quite find their place in it. And so they are worried about being lost, and about having no value, about disappearing, about not having a place. And so their natural inclination is to try and put the brakes on it, to slow it down, or in fact, pull it back to something that they were far more comfortable with. And because the change is so rapid right now, I think people who are conservatively inclined, and I also think conservative versus progressive is in your DNA. I think it's like sexual preference. You don't make an intellectual decision about it, although experience can change your mind or alter your perceptions. But I think you're either someone who looks at change and goes, "Ooh, that's exciting," or you're someone who looks at change and goes, "I'm not so sure." So, and so some of us are excited by the change, and some of us are essentially frightened by the change. And I think that's the divide. And unfortunately, the move towards authoritarianism or fascism or this far right pull back the brakes. A lot of lovely people who are conservative have sympathy towards those ideas, even though they are not sympathetic to the extreme of it. They're not, they're not bigots, they're not racists. They don't really want a dictatorship. They just want a society that they recognize a little more and that they see themselves fitting into a little more. And so going back to the question, the midterms for me was a handshake for a moment that said, okay, the change, the pullback has gone too far. Our side went too far. And it also begs the question, hey, other side, are you moving too fast? Are you moving faster than we can handle, and faster than we can assimilate, and faster than we can accommodate? And it's a good conversation to be having. It's a good time to check in.
And it's a good conversation to be led by thoughtful, experienced, responsible voices like yours. I mean it. I think it's really, really important. I want to talk about Elon in a way, and I was debating a friend about it last night, and he asked me, like, what's the big problem with Elon? I said, he's a shitty example for my kids. Like the way he treats people, the way he acts. And that's what I always go back to. That's what used to bother me the most about Trump, and bothers me the most about some leaders, with if they're mean or they're disconnected or they're callous. But I think this tone and the artistry of it, and you're a master of language and of communication. And I wish the White House had you helping them communicate. And frankly, I wish you were governor of California instead of the current governor. But
don't wish that on me, please.
Well, there's a need for our better angels, and also for voices that people trust. And I think when I described the midterms, I said, Democrats are elated, Republicans are pissed, and independents are really grateful that the lunatic didn't get elected. Right. Like that's kind of where we are. And I think you're talking about the handshake is right. And now it's fun to watch. It's interesting to watch the Democrats lose their shit over Kyrsten Sinema, right? Who now I think I could have seen coming. I met her in early days, and I think she's onto something. And you are great at understanding the power of celebrity and the power of words. Like she, in my view, is kind of this political celebrity manufactured idea, and she also is an opportunist. So she recognizes that independent's a hell of a great brand, right? Especially in the position she's in. And I think we're going to see this popularity of the idea of independent, and it could be defined by her or Tulsi Gabbard or Donald Trump or Andrew Yang or me or whoever. But I think there's going to be a fight over what it means to be independent. And I think that's important and exciting. But I also want to ask you, you are a Democrat, but you're, I think, a reasonable, thoughtful, evolved Democrat, I think, especially given your experience and how much you've seen. What is your takeaway from Sinema in particular? Because we've seen this older generation of independents that were Bernie Sanders or Angus King that still caucused with the Democrats. Now you've got Sinema. What do you make of Kyrsten Sinema and this moment?
Well, like everybody else, I'm cautious about characterizing her motives because I don't know her. So I'm limited to what she has said and what she has done. There are many possibilities on the table as to what motivates her. One may be genuinely what she claims, which is she is an independent. She doesn't fit into the marching orders of either party. She is reactive to her constituents in Arizona, and she feels that her choices, including this one, are reflective of who she is and who her supporters want her to be and how they want to be represented. That is all entirely possible. It is also possible that that she and by the way, I don't limit this to her. I think everyone in politics, to some degree, you cannot have a small ego and go into the American political scene, is certainly not at the federal level. So it's possible that there's an ego there that has felt a taste of having perhaps disproportionate influence because of her positions. That the minute she saw a majority Democratic Senate where her influence could be lessened, she found a very brilliant way to make sure that she still was an influencer. And again, I don't find that necessarily to be a negative. I don't mean it pejoratively, but it would be motivated by something other than, what's best for my constituents. And I don't know which one it is. I do believe her stated goals of trying to get out of this box of, party fealty, and that everything, philosophically on one side or the other must be adhered to. I think that's noble. And if that's what's driving her, and if she can be effective, particularly as a bridge between both sides of the aisle, then I think she could be of tremendous service to the country and to herself, whatever her personal goals may be. And, I can only sit back and hope that that is foremost in her mind. But, the other truth is, from my side, there's been a lot of damage to our nation over the last 6 years. And I'm sorry to say that from my limited lens, a lot of that damage has come from adherence or kowtowing to a very extreme far right agenda. And our institutions have been damaged, and we need to rebuild. And the only way I know to rebuild is either to convince the Republicans to come back to the table, or to take Democratic leadership and let it run the ball for a couple of yards, just so we get back to the 50-yard line instead of down by the end goals. So I think she potentially could do some damage to what I think is a necessary little bit of mending over the next year or two before we get to the next presidential election. And we won't know until we see how it all plays out, how she plays out. I'm fascinated about what's going to happen in what is presumably the McCarthy Congress, House. Somebody, I can't remember who, I'd certainly credit them, said, I wouldn't wish Kevin McCarthy's next 2 years on Kevin McCarthy. So
I think there's so much insight packed into everything you say, but it's like there's so many moments where I'm like, boy, I wish Steinfeld was still around to rip into this, right? I mean, it's just like the Kirsten Sinema of it all, and there's so many of these other figures that have emerged. I think for me, and I think for many other independents, the thing with Sinema and so many others is it just feels like bullshit, right? And it feels like it wasn't honest to the people who voted for her, right? If you came out and said, I'm an independent, vote for me, I'm an independent. But when you pull the switcheroo and say, hey, I was a Dodgers fan, now I'm a Giants fan, midway through the season, I think that is what people don't trust. And I think rightfully so, but it's also a time where, we've talked about the rise of independence. You've been building bridges. Before we hit record, you were talking about your friend's organization, Starts With Us. Yeah. And we see these other movements to try to bring not just the middle, but people who are, none of the above and who don't want to be a part of this process and want to kind of break the system. So, you operate in many different social and political and business circles. Can you talk about what you see there? I mean, you especially in the entertainment world, you've been really great. And even today, talking about what's next. You know, what do you see there, right? For the folks who say, no matter what, I'm never going to be a Democrat, and no matter what, I'm never going to be a Republican. You know, I've talked about the unique opportunity to bring them together, but we've been lacking the leadership. We're stuck with Kirsten Sinema, right? Can you talk about what you see there now and maybe in the future?
Are you talking specifically about in that political arena?
Yeah, I mean, and in the country, like in the
Yeah.
culture, right? Like for the most of the half of Americans who aren't voting regularly and don't
Yeah.
care as much as maybe we do, or folks who
Yeah.
are tracking on politics, some of the folks you
Um,
spoke of who aren't as, you know, deeply divided as maybe we think.
You know, what do I see? I see a couple things, Paul. In talking to people, it is still very hard to have conversations in which somebody must give a little on their point of view.
Mm.
One of the you know, one of the sad realities of how our politics has gone recently is that most people are not comfortable doing something that I can give you an example I had to do years ago. And I'll start with the example. When Colin Powell got up and explained why we had to go into Iraq, I was there because I believed in the truth of his argument and his evidence. I believe, and by the way, to me, Colin Powell is still a heroic and triumphant figure and someone who I respect and admire greatly. But that respect was diminished because because of who he was, I totally invested in what he said. I took it as truth. And I, among more of my progressive friends, was the guy going, no, man, they would never lie to us about this. We got to go. This is existential protection. We're getting right. And it turned out to not be true. And I then had to go to my friends and say, you know what? I was wrong. I was misled. I only had the information I had. I believed in people, perhaps before I should have, and didn't do the work to think about it more or investigate it more. And I was wrong. Well, saying I was wrong is not easy for a lot of people. You know?
Yeah.
And I've met a lot of people who they're not Trumpers, but they voted for Trump.
Right.
And it is very hard for them to say, I was wrong. They would much rather look at a couple of his policies that they think had positive ramifications and say, no, you know, you guys are way too hard on him. And you know, he's a failed man, but he did good things. And they make all kinds, but they don't want to say, I backed the wrong horse. I could have gone with a Jeb Bush or a Marco Rubio or you know, a reasonable, moderate, but true conservative Republican. And I didn't. I went with the showboat. I got on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
And somebody, it might have been Charles Blow, who I think is wonderful, but I may be crediting him with the wrong phrase. But did an article. I read an article years ago about the politics of humiliation, and that we're playing that game, and that in order for me to win, I have to humiliate you into submission or regret, and it ain't going to work. So what I'm hopeful may happen, despite my conversations where people tenaciously cling to where they were a couple of years ago, even though it does not define them, but it is too painful for them at this point to admit, perhaps I made some misjudgments, perhaps I made some miscalls. What I would like to see, and I think the midterms maybe spoke to it a little bit, is which part of the title of your show we lean into more, independent or Americans? If we could get back to thinking of ourselves as Americans and to understand what we defined American to be, at least in our higher selves. There's always been, you know, prejudice against immigrants. It's always been race prejudice and religious prejudice. We have our problems in this country, but we were and are the best example of what happens when the fabric of a society is this diverse. It makes us more resilient than any other society because we are all threatened by the same crises and the same problems. But when you are in a homogenous society that has one point of view, you only see one answer to any given solution. And if you're wrong, you're screwed. But in a diverse society where so many different experiences, so many different points of view, so many different histories, so many different lenses on every situation are available, then you have an amalgam of solutions, an amalgam of possibilities. And you generally are more capable and adaptable to overcome any obstacle, any problem. There's a strength in our division, but it's also challenging. But when I was a kid, even though the Black Civil Rights movements was I was born in '59, so the '60s, I'm a kid, and all that mayhem and all that unrest and all that struggle. I knew people that weren't comfortable with Black rights or the Black movement, but I didn't know anybody who didn't think of them as Americans. They went, this is our society, and we have an issue in our society, and we haven't dealt with it yet. But they didn't think, nobody thought, get them out of here, they're not Americans. They thought, we have to figure out how to do this, and I'm not comfortable with how the aggressiveness of their movement, but I also know that, where we came from, and we owe, and they owe, and we owe, and we have to. There was no sense of, I'm an American and they're not. Anybody that came here with the idea of building a life and contributing to this country was an American. And that, to me, has been lost in the last decade or so. And if we could just get back to that sense of, it's exactly what happened on 9/11. We were all in it together. It didn't matter who or what you were on that day. You were an American, and our country, our sovereignty, our citadel was demolished on the blood of innocence. And we came together in a way that was profoundly moving, and we kind of blew it. We kind of squandered it. Maybe we can start to get back to that. And if our candidates, if our Congress, certainly our president wants to create that again. And God help us if we ever elect another president that doesn't actually believe in the value of two parties and two points of view. You can't govern half a country. You can't make laws that leave half a nation behind. And that's where we are. Yeah. You sit in this very unique vantage point, and I think I think, especially given your experience and your sense of history, you're a voice that matters to people, especially in moments like this. And I think especially when they hear you talk about other topics. We're living in this time where you've got, like, it feels like an up and down every day. Like it's a contrast, right? Like there's a school shooting, and then fusion happens, right? Like there's this, right? There's this constant contrast in our day to day where you wake up in the morning and, oh shit, this terrible thing happened. And then later in the day, wow, this happened, right? It's I've used the World Cup in part as a structure. We're recording this as the World Cup is underway. I know you're not a huge World Cup fan, but you are on Twitter. And you've been, I think that might have been, how we stayed in touch, how many people have stayed in touch. I think that's a valuable kind of public square that I've lived in and worked in for many years. You're in there. You're one of many people I know that has been watching what's happening. What do you make of Elon Musk and this moment? Because it seems to be inflaming those divisions. Hate speech and other things now have a new forum that they didn't before, in my view, frankly. And you've been great about tackling some of these hateful issues in the past. What do you make of that? And how do you react to it when you have someone like an Elon that is
overflowing into our world. How do you approach it?
Again, to start any conversation about a person I don't know, I have to start with I don't know them. I don't know their minds. I don't know their hearts. I don't know what drives them. I can only see what they say, and I can only see what they do. There's so much about Elon Musk and what seems to be his goals that are noble and exciting and uplifting. My understanding is his essential position is that speech should be open and free and available. And, you know, he's sort of very much a libertarian in that way. He just, you know, now I have to also say I am a supporter of the Anti-Defamation League. And one of the reasons I support them is they never seem to want to shut somebody down for what they say. In fact, they do the opposite. They say, if you're going to say it, we're going to shine a light on it, and you have to own it. And if there are consequences for owning it, that's on you. We're not going to shut you down. We're not fighting to say you can't say that word or you can't make that, you know, make that claim. So I can't be an advocate for the ADL and totally crap on what may be Elon Musk's thinking. However, I don't understand the motivation for buying Twitter, other than he thought it might be a financial gain to him. But I don't understand how he thought it would be a financial gain. I'm not anywhere near that kind of business acumen, but I could look at where Twitter was financially and what its business model was doing and what service it was providing and go, I don't think this is going to be a juggernaut financial investment here. So I don't know why he bought it, unless it was with this idea of I want to create a free speech highway there. The problem with Twitter that I have, a problem with a lot of social media, and I got angry at him when he started messing around with the blue check mark, because it took some doing for me to get that blue check mark, to prove that I was who I was. And if I go on Twitter and I say something and it's not, and I haven't been hacked, and as far as I know, I haven't been hacked, I'm responsible for it. I said it. You can, you know, whether I don't think I've ever taken down a tweet because it seems stupid to me. By the time you take it down, it's well known that it was there.
Yeah.
So if I've made a mistake, I'm responsible for the mistake. If I've offended somebody or I've hurt somebody's feelings, I don't really like doing that. I feel god awful every time I am guilty of it, but I have to own it. And Twitter to me is where it's full of shadows and rocks that scum can hide under. You want to say something, have the cojones to say it. Claim it, put yourself out there and say, this is who I am, this is what I believe. Otherwise, it's worthless. And that is my whole thing, and that goes straight up to you. How do you put any faith in a faceless, nameless, all right, I'm going to take a letter. I'm P. I'm going to go on Twitter now, and I'm going to be P. No one's going to know it. And I'm going to start making claims, and I'm going to build a religion out of it. Yeah. It is insane to me that anyone would give any credence to a nameless, faceless shadow. That is my problem with Twitter. And when Elon Musk goes on Twitter and says, it's an open freeway for people who have to create avatars that are destructive and hateful and violent and provocative and create trouble in their communities for the joy of having an effect on a community, even though they can't take the credit for it. It feels powerful to them. And so they indulge in it. And for him to not know that and to fan it and to himself retweet or reclaim anything that comes out of that cesspool is, in my view, irresponsible.
Mm.
I think Elon Musk could be a great thing for Twitter. I really do. And I think believing in free speech to that effect could be a great thing. But you've got to make people responsible for what they say.
Mm.
That's the cost.
Yep.
You have to be responsible for what you say.
Yep.
Until that happens, for me, he's on the side of the villainous. But I don't make the claim that he intends to be villainous.
Mm.
I just think it's a sin of omission at this point. And until he becomes responsible for what, and says, I am responsible for what happens on this website, I can't support him. And I'm still on Twitter. I barely use it anymore, and I barely look at it anymore, because until I'm waiting to see if it comes to its senses. And if it doesn't, then please God, let the next wonderful medium for us to communicate rise, and I will go and support that. But I'm very worried about Twitter right now, as I am about any of these social media where the nameless and faceless get to play and open their mouths. You can say anything if there's no cost.
Right.
If it has to be attributed to you, you might speak very differently.
I think that this is one of the more interesting takes, Jason, I've heard on this entire thing. And I tried to, communicate to folks, the blue check mark thing is not about celebrity. It's not about status. It's about authenticity. It's about verifying, right? It's like, it's your name on the bottom of your check. It's your family name on the back of your jersey. And I try not to engage. I used to not engage with non-verified accounts just because I didn't know if they were Russian sock puppets, or they were, bots, or they were maliciously inclined people. And I've said that our enemies are celebrating this chaos and this destruction. It's got the fuckery of Putin written all over it. And it's, if Twitter is a restaurant, right, that Elon Musk owns, you're letting a bunch of assholes into the restaurant to fuck things up. They're making everyone else's experience crap. And I think that, and threatening people and making them feel uncomfortable or unsafe. And I think that's a way of looking at it, because I do think it's a community. It's a self-selecting community. It's a virtual community, but there is a sense of community. Right. And it's so much bigger than just a turd in a punch bowl. I mean, this is letting the racists stand at the end of the bar and scream at everybody while everyone else is trying to have a nice conversation with their friends and family. So I think your take is really important, Jason. I know you've generously offered, since it is a Giving Spirit season, to stick around and answer a couple of special questions for our Patreon members. I want to thank them for being our special elves during this holiday season. A final question, my friend, and thank you again for all of this insight and wisdom and positivity.
While you're praising me, can I just tell you, you remain, and you have been from the day I first knew the name, Paul Rieckhoff. You have been a true hero of mine in every sense of the word, for the service that you've given to our country in uniform, to the service that you've given to your fellow servicemen and women, and to the fact that you have these conversations, and I think you do them in a very positive way. It is easy to do a podcast like this and sit in the negative and sit in the divisive and throw stones. You don't do that. You are one of the people who are actually trying to bring sense and community back to our airwaves, to our nation. And I have so much love and admiration for you. And so screw me. Thank you for what you have actually done, because my friend, I'm happy to make people laugh, but you went in there and did the hard work. You put your life on the line to serve us, and my family owes you, sir.
Well, I'm grateful for that and for your friendship. And I think as you're our 201st episode. I think you're my favorite guest. I got to say that. I think because I just enjoy our conversations, and I know other folks listening do too. And when I created this platform, I wanted it to be a way for people to have real conversations. and to have respectful conversations, and also for the folks listening to feel like they're a part of it and they're a fly on the wall and they can see into our worlds and a bit into our souls. And I want to bring people who bring positivity to contrast all that negativity. So I want to ask you a final question. That's a tough one, but it's the end of 2022. You are like the perfect bookend to every year. We missed you last year, but the 2 years prior, folks should go back and listen. I hope you'll come back next year. Your grandson may one day listen to this conversation. What would you want your message to your grandson to be as we end 2022 and go into 2023?
It's the message that I try to now live as much as I can, and that I espouse as much as I can. And it goes back to my mom. I think you and I may have talked about it before. My mother was a nurse all her working life, and she had a long working life. She eventually built and ran a school of nursing. I mean, she was a dedicated healthcare worker. And what drove her was she felt it was the place where she could be of most service to people. And she very much wanted me to go into medicine, because she was a Jewish mother, and that's what you do. But what motivated her was she wanted her child to live a life of service. And both she and I were very concerned when I became an actor that it wasn't really that. I mean, the truth is I became an actor because apparently I was okay at it, and it served me, and I was able to make a living, and then comes celebrity, and people are generally very nice to me. And if there's no table at a restaurant, there's a table at a restaurant. If there's no ticket for a show, there's a ticket for a show. And it's these bizarre and unearned perks just because you have a certain notoriety. But I've also learned, because people have been gracious enough to share it with me, that much of my career has been of service to people during very dark times in their lives, when they needed to escape and they needed to laugh. And I've been blessed enough that most of the work I've done has been in the service of lifting people up. I don't do the heavy dramas. I don't do the gunplay. I don't do the miserable people most of the time. I tend to do musicals and comedies and lighthearted things that people have really been helped by at dark times. So what I would say to little Bennett, which is his name, is that you have been born into extraordinary blessings that you may not be aware of. You were born healthy. You were born with a mother and a father. Two parents. Doesn't matter what their gender is. Yours happened to be a man and a woman, but you have two parents who wanted you, were ready for you, and adore you. And you have a family that adores you. And you have a small community that will grow, that cares about your well-being, and that you thrive. And hopefully, as you go through your days, you will build on that community. And you will have a good education. You'll have the best education money can buy. And in a world that is challenged, the people who love you are going to try and soften those challenges to give you the best advantages you can have in this lifetime. Be of service. Be grateful. Do something with your life that makes you happy and serves as many people as you possibly can. Because if you can do that, you have lived a valuable life. You have lived a good life. No matter what mistakes you make, we all make them. I can't tell you the number of things I have done in my stupid journey that I wish I could take back, where people's feelings have been hurt. But I hope and I pray that I've done enough things of service that the balance sheet will wind up being, this was a guy that made life a better place than not. If we could each do that, I want to say to all these people who are out in the streets screaming, who are online screaming, are you having a good life? If you're that angry, if you're that hateful, if you're that put upon, you're doing something wrong. Because there's got to be somebody who loves you, that needs you to be generous, that needs you to be happy, that needs you to be positive. Stop focusing on all the people that challenge you and focus for a minute on all the people that actually care about you, that are happy you exist. Give them something today. Give them something tomorrow. Give them a laugh. Give them a smile. Give them a helping hand. Give them one selfless act that says, thank you for caring about me. Here's something I can do for you. If my children and my grandchild are doing that, they all bear my last name because they're all boys, then I'm a very proud father and a grandfather. They don't need to do anything else. I don't care what else they do or what else they become. If they can go through their life and say, I did something for somebody else today. And then I was selfish as hell, but I did one thing for somebody else today. And do that every day of their life. I cannot ask or wish anything else of them. And if we could all find a way to do that, and really, it's a very small thing. I'm not talking about miraculous changes. But to do one thing every day, every one of us, that doesn't necessarily serve us, but just serves somebody else. I can't even imagine what that change would evoke in the world.
Thank you. You are a holiday gift. Your wisdom, your wisdom, your heart, and every time I speak to you, I'm reminded your example. Especially as someone that is a leader of your family and is I think a leader of this family of America in ways that are really huge. You're giving us a tremendous gift, and I am grateful for that. I'm grateful for your friendship. I wish you a very happy holiday, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus.
Happy Festivus. Get the poll up. I have a lot of problems with you people.
and I can't wait to see all the things that young Bennett will do with his life. And it is a wonderful pleasure and an honor to know you, my friend. Thank you for all you do, and happy holidays. Stay vigilant.
Happiness back to you, brother. Have a great year.
Thank you, man.